Live from Metro Detroit, this is Michigan's only prime-time newscast, the 10 o'clock news, with Roger McCoy, Amir Megibson, Ray Lane Sports, and Gary Basner weather.
The proposed multi-million-dollar civil settlement in the Malice Green police beating case tonight is floundering in a sea of stormy legalese. The latest episode includes a move now to try and dismiss the case from federal court. Here's the latest. The civil case saga of the police beating of Malice Green continues. A squabble between Green survivors over their share of that proposed $5.2 million settlement has driven plaintiff's attorney Gerald Thruswell off the civil case. Attorneys Joseph Phoebus, pictured here, and Justin Ravitz have now taken over. Today, defense and plaintiff's attorneys met privately in federal Judge Gerald Rosen's chambers. An hour later, Judge Rosen told me, quote, "The parties continue to review and discuss the possibility of a settlement. I am committed to ensuring that any settlement in this case is given full public scrutiny," end quote. What it boils down to at this point is the proposed settlement in the Malice Green civil case appears to be in limbo right now, with the judge telling all the parties to continue to discuss this whole thing with their clients and get back, hopefully, at a later date. Meanwhile, some of the plaintiff's attorneys are pondering another legal strategy: get the case dismissed from federal court and have a settlement approved by a probate judge to avoid, among other things, that touchy issue of their attorney's fees, a hefty $1.7 million. Now, some people have asked the question whether or not the plaintiff's attorneys in this case are shopping for a judge that will approve the settlement.
I am new to the case. I was retained Christmas Eve, and I'm not shopping for anybody. As far as I'm concerned, it can stay right here in federal court, and it should stay.
So a lot of things going on with that civil case right now. Brunetta Brandy and Ernest Jarrett are the other two attorneys for the plaintiffs in the case. Both declined to comment today when it came to talking to Fox 50. As for the next get-together in federal court, well, that's undecided.
Live from Metro Detroit, this is Michigan's only prime-time newscast, the 10 o'clock news, with Amir Megibson, Roger McCoy, Ray Lane Sports, and Gary Basner weather.
Well, the verdicts in the Malice Green case left many people wondering what actually happens behind closed doors while sequestered juries are deliberating. And joining us tonight with his observations on the Green case is attorney Gerald Thruswell.
Mr. Thurswell, you certainly represent plaintiffs in police brutality cases all the time. Were you surprised by verdicts today?
Not at all. The verdict was not surprising. Watching the events on TV, hearing the testimony, this was not surprising at all.
What do you think would happen? We're talking about Walter Budson and Larry Nevers here. If they were to be going to prison, how are they going to be handled in prison?
Well, they would be put in a low-security prison with people who have been convicted of white-collar crimes. They would not be put in a prison with persons who have been convicted of violent crimes or people that they have put in prison.
What about complaints? People are saying that had it been anybody else, there would be no way that they would be able to have additional freedom on personal bonds. Is this special treatment, and is that okay in this case?
Well, I think as Judge Crockett pointed out, today the verdict comes in. They're not prepared to put them in a low-security prison, a place where they would be safe. And Judge Crockett made that quite evident. In addition, the reason he continued the bonds pending the sentence is because there was no risk that these people would flee, but they would be available for sentencing.
Following up on that, just one question. They were saying that it certainly was no surprise that this could have been the outcome, so they should have been prepared. Do you agree with that at all?
Well, maybe they should have been prepared, but apparently Judge Crockett found that they weren't prepared, and he wasn't prepared to send them to prison with people who had convicted violent crimes.
In terms of the appellate process now, I suppose a lot of people have to be asking the question, Jerry, about at least one juror's comments today, that he felt he had to make a decision under duress. He was fearful for losing his job, and he felt like he was being put pressure upon by other jurors in the case. Is that grounds for an appeal?
Well, you know, they're supposed to deliberate. They're supposed to listen to the opinions of each other, talk about the evidence that they each heard, and if one juror or all the jurors convince the others, that's the way the process is supposed to work. If you talk about duress, threats from the outside for his physical safety, what might happen to him if he rendered a not guilty verdict or a guilty verdict, that's the kind of duress that might be appealable. But just pressure from the fellow jurors, that's part of the deliberation process, where they each share their ideas and what they believe they heard and what should come about.
Judge Crockett has been praised, as I recall, for his actions and the way he carried out this case. Would you care to comment on that?
He was very courageous in the way he handled the entire case. the way he controlled the media, and the way, in the very end, the way he came up with a verdict that he thought was just. He, being an African American, coming up with the decision that he did, believing from his conscience. He didn't have to give the reasons why he found Lesnow not guilty, but he felt compelled for the community to give his reasons, and they were supported by the evidence, and that was his conscience. And it took a lot of courage.
What do you think might have happened if Nevers and Budson had submitted their jury to the bench, their trial?
You would never know. There's no way to tell. One thing is that the jurors did take 9 days or so to reach a decision, and that shows a lot for the judicial process, that they shared ideas, that they went over the evidence, and that justice was served.
What kind of a bearing do you think this case will have on future cases that might be similar in nature?
Well, as you know, our office handles numerous police brutality cases. Quite often, the police officers get up there and they say that the individual was resisting arrest. This case, and the evidence that was presented, clearly shows that Malice Green wasn't resisting arrest when he was hit in the head 14 times or 9 times. He was lying there and he was beaten to death. Similarly, the Rodney King case. So that in future police brutality cases, the word of an officer that the individual is resisting arrest is going to be questioned. Their word isn't going to be taken for gospel.
Okay, Attorney Gerald Thurswell, thanks very much for joining us tonight with your comments and your observations about the Malice Green case.
Is the Night Beat with Mort Krim and Carmen Harlan, Bernie Smilovich with sports, and Chuck Gaedeke with the big picture weather.
In recent years, a new kind of medical provider has cropped up. Ambulatory care facilities, more commonly called walk-in clinics or emergency and urgent care clinics. But a night team investigation reveals the quality of care sometimes is very debatable. Mike Winland tonight tells the story of a family whose life was changed forever after they visited such a clinic.
On the evening of May 14th of this year, 2-year-old Samantha had a cough and was wheezing. It was after regular doctor's hours. Her mom was worried, but instead of taking her to a hospital, she went to the Kids Care Walk-In Pediatric Clinic in downtown Birmingham. Open 365 days a year from 6 to 10 p.m.
The pediatrician who was on duty that night came in and did a very cursory exam on our daughter and said basically he didn't think there was anything wrong with her, that I was being overly cautious or overly worrisome. And he basically just said that we should give her some whiskey and Caro syrup and put her to bed, and in the morning she'd be fine.
The doctor staffing the clinic that night was 76-year-old pediatrician Dr. John R. Birmingham, who has practiced medicine for nearly 50 years.
After he left, and I verified with the nurse that what he said was actually what we should do, she just basically said whatever he prescribes, he's the doctor.
Samantha's parents don't want to be identified. Both are professionals and are reluctant to draw attention to themselves or their Oakland County home. But after the visit, they gave Samantha the whiskey and syrup. And the next morning, she was dead in bed.
At 7:30 in the morning, since she wasn't up yet, I went in to check her, to get her up, and she was gone. The time of death was between 2 and 4 in the morning. So she was gone for hours. When we first found her, I had tried CPR, but I pretty much knew. I already knew what was happening.
Authorities were at a loss to say why the baby had died. That's when Samantha's mom told them about the whiskey and syrup prescription.
The next day, when the coroner was out and EMS was out, and we gave them the slip of paper that he had written it down on, they were basically speechless.
Both Dr. Birmingham and the physician owner of the clinic refused to be interviewed for this report, but both insisted that the prescribing of alcohol for Samantha was essentially harmless, though the clinic owner conceded it was a quaint practice. That, however, is not the findings of a leading East Coast expert in pediatric medicine who was asked by Samantha's parents to review her case. His report says that recommending the use of alcohol did not conform to the general standards of pediatric care, and, we quote, the effects of alcohol might have significantly contributed to the untimely death of Samantha, unquote.
take whiskey and honey and you suppress the central nervous system. The child had a little food in its throat. The gag reflex was suppressed, was unable to cough up the food, and was asphyxiated, was like smothered to death.
It's still hard to imagine. It really is, just being here without her. We really, really do miss her.
In our next report, how a walk-in clinic doctor in Dearborn mistook meningitis for a cold, leaving this child deaf, blind, and crippled. With the I-Team, Mike Wendland, Night Beat.
Walk-in clinics are becoming a nationwide phenomenon. In Washington, a House subcommittee probe found major problems in the industry. Some are unregulated, many are poorly staffed and inadequately supplied. One final note, a First Care Medical Center sign was shown during a 6 o'clock promotion for tonight's story. First Care is not in any way connected to the story we've shown you tonight.
This is the Night Beat with Mort Krim, Carmen Harlan, Van Earl Wright Sports, and Chuck Gaedica's Big Picture Forecast.
Well, they're horrible stories, and we're seeing them much more often. A man has the wrong leg amputated. A young boy dies when his doctor falls asleep. How common are these hospital horrors? Night Beat medical reporter Asha Blake shows you two local women with stories that bring the problem a little close to home.
They performed what they call an episiotomy, and you know, it's supposed to make it safer for women delivering a child. Well, what happened was I was severely torn up and ripped in half.
They didn't fully analyze what my pain was. They didn't correct the situation immediately or until it was almost too late.
Both of these women went into Michigan hospitals to deliver babies. Both came back victims of hospital mistakes. Deborah's daughter, Emily, has cerebral palsy and will never walk or talk. During childbirth, Deborah's uterus ruptured. But because no medical personnel realized what was wrong, Emily almost died. Her brain permanently damaged by severe oxygen loss.
We've heard comments that it was as if a grenade had exploded inside her uterus.
Teresa's baby was fine, but she wasn't, because doctors cut too far into her vaginal area. She was left with no control of her bowels.
I had no control. Shopping, everything was terrible. It was a nightmare.
These women's stories are not isolated. In the past few months, we've heard one horror story after another. The wrong breast removed at a Grand Rapids hospital. In Florida, the wrong leg amputated and the wrong patient removed from a ventilator. In Denver, a doctor accused of causing a young boy's death by falling asleep on the job. In Boston, the death of a writer given toxic doses of a cancer drug.
Incompetence is just not limited to one particular city or one particular hospital. It's rampant throughout the United States.
Gerald Thruswell is a malpractice attorney. At any given time, his firm is handling 300 to 400 cases involving medical errors in Michigan. He agrees with critics who say hospitals just aren't doing enough to prevent mistakes.
If you look at the systems that are put into place to prevent planes from crashing, they are much more rigorous than the systems that are put in place to keep people from being killed or seriously injured in hospitals as a result of negligence.
But a spokesperson for a statewide hospital organization says there's no reason for alarm.
I don't think hospitals are dangerous places. I think obviously when a tragedy occurs, it's devastating to the patient and to the family and also to the healthcare provider. But to give you an idea of the magnitude of what goes on in hospitals, in the country, each day 2 million people are seen and treated in a hospital.
Hospitals say they can't give anyone a guarantee, but they do have safeguards in place to prevent mistakes. And they say as a patient, you can help avert tragedy by learning to ask a lot of questions, something that Deborah learned the hard way.
Don't assume that you're in a you're in a professional place and that they will always make the right decision.
I think about this, and it's really hard to accept, but knowing that Emily could have been a normal, healthy child.
Asha Blake, The Night Beat.
Tomorrow night, Asha shows you just how much information you have access to and what your rights are to avoid hospital mistakes.
Very touching stories.
This is The Night Beat with Mort Krim, Carmen Harlan, Van Earl Wright Sports, and Chuck Gaedica's Big Picture Forecast.
Well, we've all seen and heard and read the stories of hospital horrors, doctors amputating a wrong leg, giving the wrong medicine, pulling the plug when they weren't supposed to. But it doesn't have to happen to you. Nightbeat medical reporter Asher Blake shows you how you can protect yourself.
I didn't think I deserved this. I don't think, when I think about it, I think someone that goes around mutilating women and cutting up children should have had this happen to them, but all I did was go and have a baby.
Teresa Curran suffered for 5 years before getting corrective surgery. Surgery she needed to fix a hospital's mistake. During childbirth, doctors cut too far into her anal area, leaving her with no control of her bowels.
From what I understand, this could have been prevented. Had my doctor paid attention when I first told him of the problems, and had he gone in there and repaired me right then and there.
Teresa's story is frightening, but as the victim of a hospital mistake, she is not alone. According to Harvard Medical School, every year some 180,000 deaths can be attributed to medical error.
X-rays are misread. Monitors, cardiac monitors are shut off. Patients aren't monitored and disasters occur. Oxygen is shut off. People are brain damaged.
Hospitals insist these kinds of horror stories are not common. That people like Willie King, who had the wrong leg amputated at a Florida hospital, are unfortunate exceptions.
No human system is foolproof, and occasionally somebody breaks through and we have a calamity.
So what can you do to protect yourself? You can be a little less trusting and you can ask a lot of questions. But what if the information you want is about your hospital? How much can you really get?
In fact, very little. The state will tell you how many complaints have been filed against a hospital. But that number is low because it doesn't include lawsuits. Information about malpractice suits is confidential. You can't find out how many have been filed against a hospital or why.
Let's assume there's a mishap in the hospital. Let's assume something goes wrong. The doctors know, the hospital knows. There's an incident report. There's a peer review committee report. This is not available to the public. This is not available to anyone.
These Florida protesters are demanding more access to hospital records, something they say all states should allow. But hospitals say opening their books is not the answer.
I think even today, people maybe sit back and don't ask questions and don't become a partner and don't become an advocate and a champion on their own behalf or the behalf of their loved one, and that's very important.
But critics and victims of hospital mistakes say patients shouldn't be the ones who have to worry, especially when they may not know what questions to ask.
As far as I knew, that I was going to have an episiotomy, which would help deliver my son easier, but they did not tell me that it would leave me, you know, with no control of my bowels at all. They didn't tell me that.
The problem that you have is you're ill, you're sick, and you seek medical care. And you put your faith in the hospital, you put your faith in the doctor. And many times, it's blind faith.
Asher Blake, The Nightbeat.
Several Detroit hospitals tell us their best prevention is repeatedly asking you questions before you go into the operating room. They admit that can be annoying, but they'd rather risk that than to risk your health.
Settlement of the lawsuit in the death of Malice Green is in jeopardy. Family members are unhappy with the deal and have now hired, oh no, more lawyers. And you know what that means? It's now with $5.2 million being settled, right? Everybody getting their piece, a piece here, a piece there, a piece there, and a piece there. Pretty soon you have a lot of pieces. Now some more lawyers get in. Now the pieces become less, folks. Less for the people who become the victims of this. Here we go again. The settlement proposal negotiated at a speed that astonished everybody in this town. No one had ever heard of it before. Is still being held up, of course, by Judge Rosen, who said he will not be stampeded into approving this deal. Several relatives now have disagreed with details of the plan and their shares. Wow, what a surprise. Because of the conflict, they must now all find new separate lawyer. The lawyer who was representing everybody, Thurswell apparently, said, well, right now we've got a dispute. And by the way, when you have something like this, when you have all the clients being represented by one guy, obviously, sooner or later it's a conflict of interest. But more importantly, Thurswell now has to withdraw completely, I think, from the case. The conflict, as required by law and by court, I guess, the ethics fortunately somebody does, he has to withdraw completely from the case. Green's parents and 3 sisters have hired another guy, Court Quarters judge, a former judge, Justin Ravitz. Green's daughter Jacqueline and her mother Kim of Illinois have hired lawyers Joseph Phoebus and a guy out of Urbana, Illinois. Both of these attorneys, by the way, are from there. And they have a couple of questions. They said whether the amount offered by the city is adequate and whether the proposed settlement is adequate with respect to our clients. Well, that's what you call a dispute. This attorney says, I am proceeding on the assumption that they have settled the case and that is not being challenged. What is at issue is how the pie should be divided. See, we always get down to the pie. He's getting more than I am. Rabbits, the attorney, said this is swift. Judge Rosen expressed concern, of course, and now people are asking, remember we said, why are attorneys entitled to $1.65 million for doing such little work in such little time? Well, lo and behold, people are now asking for the work statements of the attorneys. Whoa, what a surprise. So somebody's going to have to account for a fee of $1.675 million. That's $1,675,000. Not a bad way to go through it if you're a lawyer. As you recall, Green's parents at the time, after this deal was announced, said, we don't know anything about it. So no surprise to us.
Tough new law capping medical malpractice awards takes effect at the end of this week in Michigan. Doctors say it's going to prevent people from filing frivolous lawsuits, but as WWJ's Dan Dickerson reports live, at least one local lawyer says what this law really does is protect bad doctors. Dan?
Joe, lawyer Gerald Thruswell has been trying medical malpractice cases for more than 20 years. He says given the fact that malpractice settlements account for less than 1% of all health care costs, this new legislation that puts strict caps on malpractice awards is a complete overreaction. Thurswell says what the new law does is discourage lawsuits, which he says in turn will take away the valuable service lawyers currently provide, policing bad doctors.
They call you out and they say, look, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. Then when the doctor goes back to get his privileges renewed at the hospital, they say to him, have you been sued in the last year or 2 years? And then the doctor has to say, yes, I have, and these are the cases. Presumably the hospital will then limit the privileges of those doctors who they believe committed malpractice.
Thurswell says his office is working overtime these days, filing malpractice lawsuits before the new law takes effect Friday. Reporting live, Dan Dickerson, WWJ News Radio 950.
WWJ News Time 623. A local lawyer says a new law designed to cut down on frivolous medical malpractice lawsuits will instead just hurt people with legitimate claims. The new law, which takes effect Friday, caps most malpractice awards at $280,000. Jerry Thurswell has been trying malpractice cases for more than 2 decades, and he says the cap will definitely cut down on lawsuits, but he says what a lot of people may not realize is that most lawsuits serve as a check on bad doctors.
Lawyers looking at clients with potential cases act as policemen and say, look, we call you out. Look at this, what you did here. Look what you did there. You're going to eliminate some of the policemen. You're taking some of the policemen off the street.
The law is designed to hold down rising health care costs, but Thurswell says medical malpractice awards account for less than 1% of all money spent on health care.
Some good news in the